Hey everybody, my name is Gabe Rodriguez. I work for Provar. I'm here to talk to you about building scalable Salesforce automation solutions within the DevOps structure. Here are a few of the things that we're going to be talking to you about today. First of all, we're going to show you what Provar is and what it does. Then we're going to talk about what does that mean for DevOps. We're going to then show you a CI/CD pipeline demonstration, and then ultimately wrap up with why does any of that matter. Like I said, my name is Gabe Rodriguez. I've been a software developer for about 15 years. I'm working with Provar in a capacity where I'm interfacing with engineering and the external customer base and helping them understand what Provar can do. Here's my friend Mike.
Thanks, Gabe. My name is Michael Dailey. I'm a DevOps consultant. Been with the company here about 2.5 years, and I've been in the industry for almost 8. I'm going to be walking through a demonstration of what Provar can do. All right, so I'm going to be walking you through an example of a business scenario in the Provar Test Builder. On the right side of my screen is Provar Test Builder. This is our Chrome extension that allows us to interface with the UI and build test cases on the fly. On the left side here is my actual UI. In this case, I'm logged into a Salesforce org. I'm going to be showing you a email to case scenario. So we're going to be going through and sending an email, generating it from the Provar application, and then searching for that case and validating in the UI. So I'm just going to click resume here to play this test case through. But basically, everything's going to be happening in the context of Provar. We're going to be sending the message, the email message as Provar. We're going to be searching and doing all the UI actions using the test automation. So here it's navigating to the case view, and from here we're going to search for our existing case record. We're using a subject variable that we created ahead of time. At the beginning of the test case, we actually created a number of different parameters and variables that we're going to use to both perform our validations, but also to populate the fields that we're going to be filling in. Things like the email contents, the subject of the email, the to and the from, and also the email signature. Great, so we searched and we found our case that we just created through email. We can confirm that with the timestamp there. From here, we're going to validate some things like the case subject, the email signature, the context of the email, the case origin, just to confirm that that is actually email as it should be. And then lastly, it's going to confirm the web email address of the sender of this particular email that was generated. And while all this is spinning here, we're just comparing what we see in the UI to our variables that we created up above. So we can make this test case dynamic. We can make it data-driven. Those same concepts apply to Provar as well. Once the validation has completed, the next step is going to be sending an email response as the customer success representative, and then updating the case details on this particular case object. So we're going to be replying to this particular email that was sent that generated the case as the customer success rep, which in this case is going to be myself. So we're going to change the from pick list to be my email address. And then we're also going to set the subject field of this email message to include the case number. So that way when we reply to it, the customer has knowledge of the case number that was created in Salesforce. We're also going to populate the body of the email message. And then the last phase is, of course, sending the email message. So once the email has been sent, Provar will do a quick scroll of the page because we are taking a screenshot of this particular page at this time for reporting purposes. Great, so the email has now been sent. The next step is to update our case details. So we're just going to update a couple of the fields for this particular case, namely the case reason. We're going to update that to be equipment complexity. And then we're also going to update the status pick list to working to let the customer know that we are working on their case. Once both of these fields have been updated in the UI, we're going to click Save and save the case. At that point in time, we're going to go to the last step of our end-to-end flow, which is going to be verifying the email response on the client side. This is going to happen very quickly, but essentially what's going to happen is we're going to verify the email that has been sent by the customer success rep. And we're going to assert all of the fields that we created as variables up above. So all of that came back positive. And the last step here is just a cleanup phase. We're querying for the case that we created, and then we're navigating to the case record, which we already have it open here. Then we're going to be performing that quick deletion here just to clean up our test data so there's no lingering case records. And the case has now been deleted. So that was a simple Salesforce UI flow. Now I'm going to show another example here. This one's going to be in the conference application, which is a React app that Gabe is going to be talking a little bit more about and making a deployment update to. He's going to be updating to show a new banner message here. I've already executed this test case in the interest of time, but just to show you what it's doing, we basically just validated all of these checkboxes here matched and that we had the correct speaking opportunities for each of the different session types. So that concludes my portion of the Provar demo. I'm going to hand it back over to Gabe, who's going to talk more about our CI/CD pipeline.
Thanks, Mike, for that demo. So as Mike just showed, what we're showing is that Provar can be incorporated into our software development lifecycle. As any DevOps organization needs to maintain, they go from requirements through deployment, bug fixes, goes in a cyclical loop. We're continually maintaining this particular lifecycle. Now, why did he show you both the Salesforce org and the front-end application? The reason why is even though that we deal specifically with Salesforce and we interact primarily with those orgs that are Salesforce-centric, the business users are more than likely the ones interfacing with the Salesforce org. You don't extend Salesforce to your end users typically. You will go about the process of building out some sort of front-end application that may communicate with Salesforce, but that's what you extend to your end users. And what we wanted to show you is that the Provar tool suite can integrate with either of those two builds. They're indifferent to the Provar tool suite. And so that was the point of showing you both of those particular demonstrations. Now what we want to transition into and show you is the CI/CD pipeline. We're going to use the AWS tool suite. No particular reason for doing that other than to not get overly close to a particular tool suite. This is pretty agnostic. You can see that there will be a Jenkins integration. This is because the predominance of our clients are using Jenkins for their build pipelines. Both AWS and Jenkins will integrate with Provar seamlessly. We'll show you a modification end to end. We'll modify the front end React application. We'll push it through the code deployment pipeline, and out the other end, you'll see the changes in the UI. So let's get started. So now let's go ahead and execute our CI/CD pipeline. So let's suppose that I was a developer in an org and the business requirement came over to me asking to make a modification to this test conference application. Now, it wouldn't have to be the test conference application. It could be a Salesforce org. Either way, it might be a layout change, a new feature, a new custom object implemented. It wouldn't matter. The process would be the same. So what I would do is understand that now I would need to go in and modify the code for this particular application to go do that. And so I would navigate over to my development console, and in my development console, I'd find the source code for that particular splash page, and I would go ahead and execute the requirement. I would enter some new banner to that particular home screen. Then what I would do is I would go into the process of committing this change up to GitHub. In this case, it happens to be code commit, which under the hood utilizes the GitHub command line structure. So I would hit git add, git commit, adding new banner, git push, and in this case it happens to go to my front end branch that I've set up for this demo. So when I hit this, it would now make a commitment up to AWS code pipeline. Now code pipeline is just like we showed in the prior PowerPoint presentation, is made up of different phases. So there's a source phase, there's a build phase, and there's a deploy phase. In the source phase, what I did when I committed my code is I sent that new code to this repository. So if I go look in my source code on this particular repository on the front end branch, I would see within my screens, within my home, that I've just now added that particular requirement. Now, I need to get this particular set of code out into my environment, right? And so to do that, I would need to execute a build project. And so what this would do would be to take that code and then compile that code so that way it can be deployed. It would execute a small environment built out on Docker, and it would execute build artifacts that could be tested against. Now, in our case, just like that that presentation showed, we have an integration with Jenkins. Again, no reason other than we know a lot of our customers use Jenkins. I could have easily done the same thing that Jenkins is doing within code commit, but it will execute some tests, and it will utilize the Provar test suite to run those tests, just like Mike showed you, and return a response that says it either passed or failed. If it passed or failed, it would then progress from this build phase into my deployment. Just to show you really quickly what that's going to do on a common CI/CD pipeline is you would get any one of these deployments, and in any one of these deployments, it would show you a set of records, of some logs, of what was actually happening. And you could see that I would be deploying build artifacts over to S3, and I would be executing on any particular deployment a series of sequential steps in my build component, my build phase. The build phase would ultimately end up in a deployment if all things passed. And so you can see the deployment if I go over to the pipeline. Now the pipeline is nothing more than the container for all the different sources. So the source, the build, and the deploy are all maintained right here in the pipeline. So here's my source, my build, and my deploy. And again, it's important to understand that even though you don't see it here, within this build structure, within this build file, which is a build.yaml file that AWS utilizes, it is going to trigger Jenkins, and it is going to execute Provar test cases that once passed will then promote to deployment. So let's turn it over to Mike so you can show you that Jenkins profile.
Thanks, Gabe. So I'll show you just some example output from the Jenkins build that was kicked off. This was a previous build. In the interest of time, we don't want to sit here and wait for it. But you can see that the build was successful. All of our test cases passed. And this is the output for that particular run. If I switch to my other view here, I can see all of my test cases laid out in the JUnit format from the Jenkins plugin. And you can see that all of those are passed there as well. And here's also where you can see that test case that I was showing you before, that email to case UI. So it also passed on my Jenkins build, as well as my test case that was executed against the React application that Gabe was working on. So all of my regression tests have passed. So at that point, it would be kicked off to the deploy phase where we would update the application.
Thanks, Mike. And to see the result of all of that code pipeline build, you can see that our new requirement has now been deployed to production. So that new banner is now out there in the wild, and the application is now live and can be exposed to our end users. So in summary, what did you see? You saw how Provar is a process automation tool, and it can fit within your CI/CD pipelines, and it can help develop you in a DevOps culture and getting feature development out the door quicker. So there's that aspect. There's another one which comes in the form of dollars and cents. And this one isn't to be ignored either. If you consider the geographic dispersion of all the testing facilities across an enterprise, you could see differences in rates, and those rates ultimately add up. And it would be better if we could automate those particular processes and spend that money and that time on a capital project that's sitting on the product roadmap. Ultimately, what we want to do is get you to a place where you're achieving something that looks like this blue line. If you map total ownership cost to feature development, what we want to see is more features, but we only want to have an incremental adder to those features, to our total ownership cost. And if we can do that, you're going to achieve this blue line where the cost per feature is lower. And that's what we want to see. In general, companies, unfortunately, may in fact have this as a reality, where their cost profile looks more like a step function, where they have a particular capacity with their teams, and to get more out of those particular teams, they have to input a significant investment to get more teams, so that way they can keep up with the feature velocity. We don't want to see you do that. And with tools like Provar and process automation, inserting those back into a pipeline, we can help you achieve this blue line. And we'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you so much.